Hey y'all, welcome back to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. Thanks for joining us here on YouTube. Hope that you'll subscribe if you haven't. We are continuing our countdown to meet bird move-in day. Actually, we're finishing up our countdown, really. We're going to be wrapping it up here. We have just today and tomorrow before our chicks are scheduled to hatch. They're scheduled to move in on August 23rd, 2023. That's going to be a flock of 300 Cornish cross meat chickens. And we're really excited that you're here to join us in moving them in. So today we're kind of doing just a pause in our preparation. This is day 21 of countdown to meet bird moving day, but we're kind of pausing to think back over what we've done and think ahead over the birds coming in, and just making sure that we've taken into consideration the things that we need to do in the barn, because then tomorrow will be the last day of our countdown, and on day 22 or any time that it's the day before we move birds in, we actually set up the brooder space because we want it to be like turnkey. We want it to be ready to just bring the birds in and basically just set them down into the brooder, move them in and let them settle in, and then flock management begins. So we'll actually, as we wrap up our countdown to meet bird move-in day today and tomorrow, we'll wrap up the preparation, and we'll switch gears to being able to track a flock from day 1 through day 42, and we're going to share that with you. We'll do a video on those birds. We'll upload a video each day, Monday through Saturday, and you'll be able to see some of the management practices that we use with our flock, and you'll be able to see how rapidly Cornish cross meat chickens start, grow, and finish and become ready to be processed into poultry. And they really make some of the best poultry we've ever tasted. So we're so glad that you're here to join us. We'll include you in raising that flock through our videos. And we're actually walking into our meat bird production barn where we are going to raise these birds. So like I said, day 21, not really a lot of exciting things going on. We're kind of pausing to think back through, how have we done planning? How have we done getting ready? And we're also thinking ahead, like looking at our setup, is this going to all work the way that we want it to work? We are, the two important things that we are going to be doing after we finish recording, we're going to be going back through the perimeter of our building inside here at the base of it, at the floor, and looking for things like this. For example, here's a gap at the bottom of this set of carriage doors. We previously had like a 2x6 in there. We took it out when we brought the skid steer in to clean the bedding material out from the flocks the first half of the year. So we need to replace that. Any gap like that, we don't want that, because anything that could attack our chickens, if it was able to fit through that gap, it could get in here and be a serious threat to the flock. So we'll just put like a 2x6 in there and fasten it in at each side of the doorway, and we'll stop up that gap. And really, here's another set of carriage doors right here. It's hard to tell that from inside, but set of carriage doors there, and we really actually have the same gap at the bottom of it, and you can see where we've stopped it up with pieces of scrap lumber. Now you see some settling there where our base material, that's our flooring, our base materials, limestone screenings, it's settled some there. So, we'll fill that in with some bedding. And after about day 14 of this flock growing, actually we'll take away this wall system. It's actually made out of transport crates that we just, kind of use in a different application, and it sort of gives an added value to our investment in those crates. But about day 14, we can take those away, and the birds can just spread out into all of this area. So as they do that, we will have put bedding down on this, and bedding will be building up along the base of this wall as well. But we'll watch all of this to make sure that nothing is digging in from outside. And we also want to make sure that chicks don't find little gaps and get out. But as I said, with them being in this space, more enclosed in this temporary space the first 14 days, they really can't get to any places where they can get out. We are certain that these holes are too small for them to get through, so this will contain them, and we'll be adding bedding to that as well. Now, here's another set of carriage doors, And we actually do have crates in front of here because we do get a little bit of a gap there. You can see we already have a board there as a stopgap measure, but we still get some gaps there. So we actually put some of those up in front of those places to help us, but we'll watch, you know, down at the base of the wall there for all of that. So that's an important thing that we're doing the next to last day when we're getting ready for chicks. And the other thing that we're doing the next to last day before we get chicks moving in is just rechecking these heat lamps. And I do want to spend a few minutes talking about heat lamps and how the birds use them, and about 3 important pointers on them. So for example, here's a heat lamp hung. We hang ours from the rafters, and we actually can slide it like this way or that way on that rafter if we need to move where it is. And we will, in fact, be bumping that temporary wall out again about another 3 feet so we can set another set of lights about here. But the way that chicks use these lamps is they turn their tail toward the heat source, and they line up and form like a circle or a semicircle, just depending on how many of them there are, around the outer edge of that beam of light, because that's where it's hot. So if they're chilly and they want to be warmer, they edge into that. And if they're warm and become hot and want to cool down, they edge out away from it. But they'll form a tail end circle all around that light in order to use it. Well, in this case, that temporary wall there had been where this shavings is ending. So we felt like there wasn't enough room here for birds to spread out away from this light. This is noticeably warmer here than it is out here, obviously. So for us, it's really important to us that our birds are able to move away from the heat source if they feel that they're getting too warm. So the 3 pointers that we want to include in this video about heat lamps is, first of all, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So it is important, if you're going to have an environment that's going to get colder than the desired temperature for the birds, it is important to have supplemental heat. But if you have too much supplemental heat, it really can kill them. So we have to be mindful of the temperature that the birds want to be, and if they're comfortable or not. So that's the first thing. Know that it is possible to use heat lamps to the point of overheating the birds, and that can kill them. The second thing is to avoid that, and to avoid letting the birds get chilled, use the behavior of the birds to be your indicator for what your birds need temperature-wise. In other words, really observe your birds and let their behavior be the driving force of how you adjust for temperature. If you turn heat lamps on or turn heat lamps off, or raise the height of the heat lamp so it's further away from your birds, let their behavior be the indicator. If the birds are huddling up on top of each other, smashing each other, trying to pack together, that's an indicator that they're too cool. When they're too cool, they're going to tend to stay in that little huddle. They're not going to want to get up to go to food, to go to water. That's going to affect their growth. Conversely, if the birds are spread out, but they look limp and lethargic, and they're just laying there, and they won't go to food, and they won't go to water, and they just look like they're holding their wings out, maybe like they're panting, they're probably indicating to you that they're too warm. So in that case, if there's heat lamps on, it's appropriate to turn them off. If there's no heat lamps on and they're too hot, it's appropriate to get some air moving around them and try to cool those birds down. Now you can probably see the sweat dripping. It's hot. It's in the 90s here. Rural Southeast Ohio, USA, late August. So for this flock moving in, temperatures are going to be great, I believe. Daytime temperatures are going to be great for brooding chicks. We are going to have temperatures drop into the 60s overnight. So we probably will be using heat lamps overnight most of raising this flock. And as the birds get bigger, fewer birds fit around the heat lamps and benefit from the warmth coming off of them. So that's why we have to basically add heat lamps if we need to continue using supplemental heat, which typically in this building we do, because it's almost like an open air structure because the heat can dissipate very easily out of our building. Whereas if you're using something that's very closed in when you're first brooding your chicks, be aware that they have a lot of body heat they're creating. They're putting off a lot of body heat. So they may not need a lot of supplemental heat if you have very solid walls closing them in more than the example that you're seeing here. And I said I wanted to give you a third pointer about heat lamps. I do want to be really blunt in saying, and not trying to be discouraging, but blunt in saying, heat lamps are a fire hazard. And if we are using them, we need to be aware of that, and we need to be motivated to monitor them nearly constantly, always looking for anything that looks amiss in the heat lamps. So if you're using them, just be aware that they really are considered a fire hazard, but I will tell you that we have used them for 4 years. Fortunately, they've worked as they're supposed to. They're efficient at what we're trying to accomplish. They are relatively cost effective. And when I say cost effective, I don't mean that they're cheap to run. They're not. They're actually quite expensive to run. They're powered by electricity. They're 250 watt bulbs, 120 volt, pull a lot of amps. They are costly to run, but compared to other things to use as heat sources, they're relatively cost effective that way. So just know that it is something that when we have it in use, we need to monitor it, we need to be aware of it, we need to be frequently checking it for safety, and we need to be watching our birds' behavior to see if they're comfortable. So just use the reference points. Like they like to start out like 95 degrees the first week, and we like to bump the temperature down 5 degrees per week out to 6 weeks, and that's the duration that we raise the birds. But we aim for that reference point, but we watch the bird's behavior to indicate to us if those birds need more heat or less heat, and then we respond and adjust accordingly. So thank you for joining us. We have a great community of viewers here. We can share on comments if y'all have feedback or questions or experiences, and we learn from each other. So please join us tomorrow for our last day of our Countdown to Meat Bird Move-In Day, and then